Platting Board will begin. It is 6:32, and today is the 19th of November. May we have roll call, please?
Mr. Abel?
Here.
Mr. Fuller? Mr. Young?
Present.
Mr. Cole? Mr. Edmondson? Mr. Walker?
Present.
Ms. Enix?
Present.
Mr. Porter?
Present.
Thank you.
And for the record, Mr. Fuller and Mr. Edmondson are excused. Not. May I have a positive motion for approval of the action summary for Wednesday, October 1st?
I move to approve the action summary for Wednesday, October 1st.
Thank you. Mr. Porter seconds. Is there any opposition? Hearing and seeing none, the motion carries and the action summaries are approved. Next, may I have approval for the minutes for Wednesday, September 3rd, 2014 and Wednesday, October 1st, 2014.
I move to approve the minutes for September 3rd, 2014 and October 1st, 2014.
Thank you. Mr. Walker moves. Mr. Cole seconds. Is there any opposition to the motion? Any discussion, corrections? Hearing and seeing none, the motion carries. Thank you. Next item is special order of business disclosures. Mr. Porter.
Good evening. I have two disclosures on both. The first case number S12104. R&M. I work for R&M, and R&M is doing the platting, but I don't believe that that's going to affect my judgment in any way. I don't have anything to do with the case, so that's my first disclosure. On the second one is
I'm just going to do one at a time. And may I have a positive motion directing Mr. Porter to participate in case S12104 Girdwood Industrial Park subdivision, please. Mr. Cole. And second by Mr. Bell. Mr. Cole, speak to your motion, please. Thank you. And does anybody have any questions? I do. Mr. Porter, just for clarity, you have no financial or personal interest in the matters for this case. Is that correct?
I don't have, no, I haven't touched the case for R&M, so other than working for the same firm, which I don't believe is substantial in this case.
Thank you. And you can remain impartial in fact and action as a member of this board without personal bias?
Absolutely.
In that case, I will be supporting the motion also. Is there any opposition? Hearing and seeing none, Mr. Porter, you're directed to participate. And go ahead with your second disclosure, please.
So on the second case number S12114-1, Fire Station 9, Tracks 1 and 2, I'm involved in the design of an adjacent parcel for the Rabbit Creek Elementary School. So we've had to do some research in the case, but again, I don't believe that that'll affect my judgment in any way, and I don't have any profit to gain by any decisions made.
Thank you. May I have a positive motion directing board member Mr. Porter to participate? Mr. Walker.
I move to direct Mr. Porter to participate in case S12114. He does not have a substantial part in the present action. He has stated he doesn't have anything that varies directly or substantially with the outcome in this action. and that he doesn't have a significant monetary interest in this particular action. His interest relates to neighboring property in the vicinity.
Thank you. And Ms. Enix seconds this, and I have a comment, and that it's my understanding that you're disclosing that you have specialized knowledge of this property and the adjacent property.
That's correct. I've done research on the section line easements to verify that they exist.
Thank you. Is there any opposition to this motion? Hearing and seeing none, the motion carries, and you're directed to participate. Thank you. Are there any additional disclosures? Well, I have plenty. I'm going to put a couple of these together. On case S12104, Girdwood Industrial Park subdivision, and case S12114-1, Fire Station 9, tracks 1 and 2. My firm has conducted business with the petitioners in the past. We have also had business with the petitioners' representatives on other matters. And I was personally employed by the petitioners' representatives for more than 20 years ago. I have no financial or personal interest in the matters before the board. I can remain impartial in fact and action as a member of this board without personal bias. My past involvement and personal interest will not prevent me from fairly evaluating the facts of this case. May I have a positive motion directing me to participate in these two cases, please? Mr. Walker.
As to case number S12104 and S2114, I direct that Mr. Dan Young be directed to participate in these actions.
Thank you. And Mr. Porter seconds. Is there any opposition to this motion? Hearing and seeing none, I'm directed to participate in the two cases, Girdwood Industrial Park and the fire station. The next two cases I have disclosures are the S12111 Bella Vista Anchorage Subdivision and S12112 Eagle Crossing East Subdivision, and I have conflicts of interest in both of these, and I ask to be recused, please. I have a positive motion directing me to participate. Mr. Walker, and Mr. Cole's going to second.
As to case S12111, Bella Vista Anchorage Subdivision, and S12112 Eagle Crossing East Subdivision, I direct that Dan Young participate in these two hearings.
Thank you. And would you speak to your motion, please?
I intend not to support this motion. You've stated that you have a conflict of interest, and so you should not be participating in these two matters.
Thank you. Is there any questions? Since there's oppositions, we'll vote. A positive vote directs me to participate. A negative vote directs me to be recused. And this motion fails, and I will be recused from the two cases, the Bella Vista Anchorage Subdivision and Eagle Crossing East Subdivision. My next disclosure is case S12118 Sojourn Square Subdivision, lots 1 through 43. And in this matter, I have special knowledge of this parcel. My firm has conducted subsurface investigations and other geological research. In this matter, I have no financial or personal interest in the matters before the board. I can remain fair and impartial in fact and action as a member of this board without personal bias. And my past involvement and personal interests will not prevent me from fairly evaluating the facts of this case. May I have a positive motion, please, directing me to participate? Mr. Porter.
I move to direct Dan Young to participate in the case number 12118. He has stated that he will remain impartial. So.
Thank you. Mr. Walker seconds. Is there any additional discussion? Is there any opposition? Hearing and seeing none, I am directed to participate. Next item on the agenda is informational items. We have the abbreviated plat summaries for September 22nd, 2014, September 29th, and October 6th, October 20th, and November 3rd, 2014. These are informational only. Is there any comments, corrections, or discussion? Hearing and seeing none, we'll move on. The next item is the tonight, I have just for an announcement tonight on the cases of the Bella Vista Anchorage subdivision and also Eagle Crossing East subdivision. We're going to have a short board tonight. We will have a quorum, but there will be just five members here to vote. When there is a short 5-member board or commission and a postponement is offered to and agreed to by the petitioner, they will be moved to the next regular agenda. This could occur within 30 days, which does not require renoticing the case, new public hearing notices, advertising. If the petitioner is willing to postpone but unable to attend the next available meeting date within 30 days, the petitioner has a one-time only option to choose the next date certain she can attend at no extra fee. When a postponement is requested by the petitioner, there is a rescheduling fee, AMCR 21.20.007A, and a new public hearing date shall be determined by the Planning Division. This will put their case in the next available cutoff date queue as if they were submitting their case for the first time. Do either of the petitioners or the representatives wish to postpone tonight?
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, my name is Jim Sawhill, and I'm here tonight to represent Driftwood Bay LLC and Eagle Crossing East subdivision, and we would like to go ahead and postpone.
You're going to postpone?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, my name is Tony Hoffman, and I'm representing ACC Investment, and we will be going forward tonight on the case of Bella Vista.
Thank you. Mr. Cole. I'll help you. That's called ex parte contact, and you're disclosing it correctly. So the correct procedure is exactly what you followed. You get pluses for that. Is there? But since we do have this disclosure, let's put this for the board to decide. So, in which case is this? That's correct. That's correct. You should.
Well, hang on. Okay.
Mr. Cole, that your disclosure is appropriate as ex parte, and it's completely innocent, and having the disclosure makes it everything okay, except that the board has to decide now. So which case is this? Thank you. Okay, in the matter of case S12118, Mr. Cole has disclosed ex parte communication. May I have a positive motion directing him to participate, please? Mr. Walker and Mr. Porter is going to second it. Mr. Walker, will you state your motion and speak to your motion?
As the case S12118 Sojourn Square, I direct that Mr. Cole be directed to participate in this matter. He doesn't have a substantial part of an interest in the present action or substantial part of it. His only activity was an ex parte contact with a witness in this matter, and he didn't even know what matter it might relate to, and the questions only participated or concerned procedural matters, which is matters from the public can be testified to. So,
thank you. Is there any opposition to this motion? Hearing and seeing none, the motion carries. Next item on the agenda is the consent agenda, which is a time extension. May I have a positive motion to approve the consent agenda, please? Mr. Walker and Mr. Cole seconds. Mr. Walker, will you state your motion, please?
as to case S12122, Stephen and Cheryl Ream, I move that the first 18-month time extension be granted.
Thank you. And is there any discussion on the consent agenda? Is there any opposition to this motion? Hearing and seeing none, the motion carries. Consent agenda is approved. Do we have any old business? The next item on the agenda is new business and public hearings. The procedure by which the public may speak to the Platting Board at its meeting is: after the staff presentation is completed on public hearing items, the chair will ask for public testimony on the issue. Persons who wish to testify will follow the time limits established in the Commission Rules of Procedures. Petitioners, including all of his/her representatives, have 10 minutes. Part of this time may be reserved for rebuttal. And just to be clear on that, if you don't use all your time, the remaining time can be used for rebuttal. However, if you wish to reserve a certain amount of time, tell us at the very beginning and we will reserve that time for you. In other words, if you want to reserve 2 minutes, we'll set the timer for 8 minutes and we'll let you know when the 8 minutes are up, and you'll have 2 minutes reserved. Representatives of groups, community councils, PTAs, etc., have 5 minutes, and individuals have 3 minutes. When your testimony is complete, you may be asked questions by the board. In other words, don't sit down immediately, please. You may only testify once on any issue unless questioned by the board. Any individual may have appeal rights relating to any action the Platting Board takes. Appeal of this decision or any of the conditions is governed by AMC 21.11.304. The decision of the board at the scheduled public hearing shall become final 7 calendar days after the date of the decision is made on the record, unless a written request is submitted to the Planning Division prior to the expiration of the 7th day to prepare a written decision based upon the record made at the hearing, and the request is accompanied by a written notice of intent to appeal. Adoption of the written decision by the Platting Board becomes the final appealable decision. within 20 days of the final appealable decision, an interested party must file with the municipal clerk either a written motion alleging new evidence or changed circumstances per AMC 21.11.503, or an appeal of the board's final appealable decision per AMC 21.30. The first case tonight is Girdwood Park subdivision. May we have staff's presentation, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This preliminary plat is a request for subdivision of one lot into 24 lots and 3 tracts with variances from AMC 2180-240 design standards, cul-de-sac length, and AMC 2180-300F design standards, lot dimensions, the width of a flagpole portion of a flag-shaped lot. This development is to occur in 3 phases, with phase 1 including development of tract A and blocks 1 and 2. Phase 2 will include development of block 3, and phase 3 will include development of block 4. As this is a phased development, the petitioner is requesting a 60-month approval. The petition site is located east of Alyeska Highway and south of Ruane Road in Girdwood. The property is zoned GOS, Girdwood Open Space, GIP, Girdwood Institutions and Parks, and GI1, Ruane Road Industrial Districts. The property is currently the site of the AWU wastewater treatment facility that serves Girdwood. The proposed subdivision is bounded by California Creek to the west and Glacier Creek to the east. It is also encumbered by Class A wetlands found primarily along the southern boundary of the site. The petitioner is required to construct proposed Girdwood Industrial Circle to a 28-foot wide paved street section, edge of pavement to edge of pavement with a 2.5-foot gravel shoulders. The road will be constructed in 3 phases with a temporary turnaround easement provided at the terminus of each phase that will automatically be vacated upon extension of the roadway. The plat shows a building and several connexes that either encroach into the Girdwood Industrial Circle right-of-way or are located within the required yard setbacks. The building and connexes must be relocated and/or the right-of-way realigned to ensure that all the structures meet the required setbacks for each appropriate zoning district. The property also includes the historic Iditarod Trail route that is located along the west bank of Glacier Creek. A 100-foot trail easement will be dedicated with this platting action as requested by the Girdwood Board of Supervisors. As I mentioned earlier, this plat includes 2 variance requests. Variants were requested from AMC 2180-240 and AMC 2180-300F. I'd like to go through the 4 standards required for granting of a variance. First standard, staff finds that this standard is met for both variances. For AMC 2180-240, strict application of the subdivision regulations would clearly be impractical and unreasonable when considering this variance. The existing lot is bisected by California and Glacier Creeks and contains wetlands which make a through road prohibitive. AMC 2180-300G, there are special circumstances that exist on this property that make the strict application of the subdivision regulations unreasonable. This property is bisected again by California and Glacier Creeks and is encumbered by wetlands. Due to the limited area of developable land, flagpoles exceeding 100 feet in length are necessary and reasonable. Standard number 2, staff finds that this standard is met for both variances. For AMC 2180-240, the granting of this variance will not be detrimental to the public or injurious to other property in the area. The surrounding area is largely undeveloped and contains dedicated open space. Developed property does exist south of the petition site. However, Class A wetlands separate the developable portion of the petition site and the developed property to the south. For AMC 2180-300G, the granting of this variance will not be detrimental to the public or injurious to other property in the area as well. The proposed development is bounded by creeks on both sides and contains undevelopable Class A wetlands, well away from any other developable property. For standard number 3, staff finds this standard be met for both variances for AMC 218240. The intent of this section is to discourage, for safety reasons, development creating roads that end in long dead-end cul-de-sacs. While it is clear that this development does not come close to meeting the maximum 600 feet allowed by AMC 2180-240, there does not appear to be a reasonable alternative. Due to the unusual physical circumstances of the property, construction of a through road appears to be prohibitive. For AMC 2180-300G, granting of the requested variance will not have the effect of nullifying the intent and purpose of the subdivision regulations. It does not allow a use that would otherwise not be permitted in the zoning district, nor does it violate the goals and policies of the Girdwood Area Plan. For standard number 4, staff finds this standard to be met for both variances. For AMC 2180-240, undue hardship would result from strict compliance with the subdivision regulations. Denial of the variance would effectively make the southern portion of the property undevelopable. For AMC 2180-300G, undue hardship would again result for the petitioner when considering strict compliance with the subdivision regulations. Given the limited developable land available, longer flagpoles appear to be necessary. So with that being said, staff would like to recommend approval of the phasing plan, approval of both variances, and approval of the plat for 60 months subject to the conditions listed on pages 11, 12, 13, and 14 of your staff packet. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there questions of staff? We will now open the public hearing portion of this meeting. Would the petitioner or the petitioner's representative please come forward, state your name, spell your last name for the record, please, and let us know if you'd like to reserve time for rebuttal. Lots to do in the first 15 seconds.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, my name is Dave Hale with R&M Consultants, HALE, representing HLB. We agree with the staff comments. We've been working with them, so we agree with all their findings and their recommendations. So I don't really have any comments at this time, but I can certainly answer any questions you have, and like to reserve my time for rebuttal if possible.
Thank you. You have 9 minutes and 38 seconds for rebuttal. Are there questions of Mr. Hale? Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, Mr. Walker has a question for you. Mr. Walker.
I'm Mr. Hale. The question I had was with respect to the phasing plan. I was hoping you could address the particular complexity of this project and why it is you need a full 60 months for that phasing plan.
The project's planned to be phased so that what can be built and then lots sold to recoup the cost so that the next portion can be built. Mm-hmm. So initially they're going to build a road down to basically the end of the large tract, which is occupied by AWW, subdivide or plat those lots so that the Heritage Land Bank can give the Tract A to AWU, and then the other lots could be leased or sold, however that works. And then once those are sold or disposed of or leased, then they'll have some money and be able to move on to the next phase. And they'd like to do that in two other phases.
Are there any additional questions? Thank you. Is there anyone from the public wishing to testify on this matter? State your name for the record, please.
Brian Burnett. Good evening, Mr. Chairman and Board. I am Vice Chairman of the Girdwood Land Use Committee and also Vice Chair of the Girdwood Trails Committee. And I'm here to speak in favor of the motion in front of you guys, in front of the board this evening.
Are you speaking on behalf of those organizations?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. So you'll have 5 minutes.
Okay.
Proceed.
And I will try and be brief this evening. And I'm here to speak in favor of granting the plat for the property. Girdwood has long had a priority of getting this plat set in the Girdwood Industrial Zone, and I'm sure you're very well aware of that. And we have also been looking to have the Iditarod alignment secured going through Girdwood, and this plat, once it's recorded and the trail can become dedicated, gives us a way to fund trail work in the valley and secure this valuable piece of recreational infrastructure in Girdwood.
Thank you. Are there questions for Mr. Burnett? Thank you. Is there anyone else wishing to testify tonight? Anyone at all? Mr. Hale, would you like to use any of your time for rebuttal? Are there any questions for Mr. Hale before I close the public hearing portion of this meeting? I hear and see none, so the public hearing portion is closed. The matter now rests with the board. May I have a positive motion? It looks like I'm going to get one from Mr. Cole. We're going to need 3 motions, Mr. Cole. You can start with the first one.
The first motion, I believe, is the motion to approve of the phasing plan in case number S12104.
That's correct, and Mr. Walker seconds it. Would you speak to your motion, please?
I intend to vote for this motion based on the information provided by staff, which has been cited, and the response of the petitioner to Mr. Walker's question.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? Is there any opposition? Hearing and seeing none, the motion carries and the phasing plan is approved. Next, I would like a positive motion for approval of the variances. Can we go? Yes, variances can be together. Mr. Cole is going to make the motion. Mr. Cole, would you speak to, or would you state your motion, please?
In case S12104, I would move to grant the variance requested to AMC 2180-240 and AMC 2180-300F.
Are you referring to 300G or 300F and the approval?
Oh, it's 300F, but I guess it is G. Up above it says F. Down below it says G.
Okay, would you...
It should be G, but it was misstated here, so it's my fault. It should be G.
Okay, thank you. And would you speak to your motion, please?
I intend to vote for these 2 variance requests based on the information that is provided in pages 9, 10, and 11 of our package, the testimony given by staff today, and my own independent finding that the 4 standards for meeting the granting of a variance have been met. Specifically, that there are special circumstances and conditions affecting the property that restrict the application of the provisions of the subdivision regulations would clearly be impractical, unreasonable, or undesirable to the public. That strict application would be impractical and unreasonable when considering strict application of the regulations would be impractical and unreasonable when considering this variance. There are special conditions that exist on the property that make it unreasonable. The granting of the variance will not be detrimental to the public welfare. The variances will not have any effect on nullifying the intent and purposes of the subdivision regulations, and undue hardship would result from the strict compliance with the specific provisions.
Thank you. Any additional findings or discussion? I will state that I am also going to support this motion, and I concur with your findings, and I also, on page 9, due to the limited area of developable land, the flagpoles exceeding 100 feet in length are necessary, so that's one of the findings that I wanted to add to the record. Is there any opposition to this motion? Hearing and seeing none, the motion carries and the variances are approved. May I have a positive motion for approval of the plat for 60 months and subject to conditions, please? Mr. Walker is going to make this motion. Mr. Walker, will you state your motion, please?
As to case S12104 Girdwood Industrial Park Subdivision, I move for approval of the plat for 60 months subject to the conditions listed 1 through 12 on pages 11 through 14 of the staff presentation.
Thank you. Mr. Cole seconds. Mr. Walker, would you speak to your motion, please?
I believe that the conditions have been stipulated to and agreed to by the petitioning party, and that the conditions also are supported by the staff packet and the comments that are made in the packet by the participating organizations.
Thank you. Is there any additional findings? Is there any, well, I will have one. I want to state that Mr. Burnett was here in favor of representing 2 organizations and supported this based on the trail, which is item number, I lost it. Preserving the alignment of the Iditarod Trail and the 100-foot trail easement number 5 on page 12. So the only testimony we received was on this case was in favor of this approval of this plat, excuse me. And with that, are there any opposition to this motion? Hearing and seeing none, the motion carries and the plat is approved for 60 months subject to the conditions on page 1 through 14 of the plat packet. Good to go. Next item on the agenda is the fire station number 9, tracks 1 and 2. May we have staff's presentation, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a case submitted under the new code. This is a request to subdivide one parcel into 2 tracts. The purpose of the subdivision is to facilitate the development of a new fire station on Tract 1 and the dedication of Tract 2 to parkland. In 2013, the Assembly approved this location for Fire Station 9 with Assembly Resolution 2013-34. It's in the back of your packet if you'd like to see that AR. Separate cases are being processed to rezone Tract 1 to public lands and institution zoning and Tract 2 to parks and recreation zoning, and to review the Fire Station 9 site plan as well. Lake Otis Parkway is a local road that dead ends at the Rabbit Creek Elementary School. The preliminary plat should dedicate 30 feet of right-of-way to Lake Otis Parkway from DeArmond Road to the Rabbit Creek Elementary School in accordance with dedication of streets. The private development section provided comments stating that further investigation is needed to determine whether the subgrade of the section of Lake Otis Parkway abutting the Tract 1 can handle the weight of fire trucks from Fire Station 9, which will be located on that tract. This should be a condition of approval as well. The petitioner intends to construct a 10-foot wide trail on property parallel to Lake Otis Parkway with a site plan review that is being processed with a separate case, UDC case 2014-0170. Therefore, the preliminary plat should show a 10-foot wide trail easement parallel to Lake Otis on Tract 1 from DeArmond Road to the south lot line of Tract 2. Also, the non-motorized transportation coordinator requests that the construction of a 5-foot wide paved trail within the 20-foot wide utility easement on Tract 2 adjacent to Lake Otis Parkway happen with this plat between Tract 1 and the striped pedestrian crosswalk, which is located at the school. Currently, this is an unpaved trail being used by the neighborhood. There's no need to dedicate this dedicated trail easement over this trail because it's within what will become dedicated parkland. The department's recommending approval of the preliminary plat with conditions 1 through 7 on pages 6 and 7 of the packet. I'd be happy to answer any other questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions of staff? If not, we're going to open the public hearing, and so, Mr. Porter has a question. Go ahead, Mr. Porter.
So where do you envision the 10 feet under tract 1? Where is that going to be along with the 30 feet? Is it going to be outboard of the 30 feet? So there will be 30 feet and then another 10 feet for trail?
Correct.
Thank you.
Is there any other questions of staff? The public hearing portion is now open. May we have the petitioner's representative? Would you like to reserve any time for rebuttal?
Whatever I have left.
Okay, thank you. State your name for the record, please.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, my name is Tanya Hickok, Hickok, with Dell HKM, tonight representing the municipality of Anchorage in the subdivision of one unsubdivided parcel into 2 tracts. As Mr. McLaughlin stated, this is in support of the Fire Station 3 relocation along DeArmond and Lake Otis, which is adjacent to the Rabbit Creek Elementary School. We have reviewed the conditions of approval and we don't have any comments. So with that, we'd be happy to answer any questions you may have, and I'll reserve whatever we have for rebuttal.
Thank you. You have 9 minutes and 25 seconds for rebuttal. Are there questions for Ms. Hickok? Excuse me. Thank you. No. Are there anyone from the public wishing to testify? Anyone at all? It's your last chance to talk about Fire Station 9 tonight. Hearing and seeing none, would you like to use any of your additional time? No? Are there any questions of the petitioner's representative? Seeing and hearing none, we're going to close the public hearing portion, and the matter now rests with the board. May I have a positive motion? And Mr. Cole, I'm going to let you make the motion.
In case number S12114, I move for approval of the plat for 18 months, subject to the numbered conditions 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 on pages 6 and 7 of our package.
Thank you. And Mr. Walker seconds. Mr. Cole, will you speak to your motion, please?
I intend to vote for this motion on the grounds and based on the evidence provided to us in our package, the testimony of staff, which we've heard today, and the testimony of the petitioner. I would note that we haven't received any negative testimony, and as best I could tell, there wasn't any provided in the package.
Thank you. Are there any additional findings? I will add that the petitioner is in concurrence with the recommendations on pages 6 and 7, and that's all I'm going to add. So is there any opposition to this motion or any additional discussion? Hearing and seeing none, the motion carries, and the plat is approved for 18 months, subject to the conditions on page 6 through 7 of the packet. Okay, I'm recusing myself from the next two cases, and Mr. Walker, the vice, no, two. Oh, that's right. Correct, the next case. And Mr. Walker's, the vice chair, is going to take over the meeting.
Okay, the board will now hear case number S12111, Bella Vista Anchorage Subdivision. May we have staff's presentation?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This preliminary plat is a request for subdivision of one tract of land into 3 tracts of land. It's commonly referred to as a tract plat. This subdivision divides 29 acres into 3 large tracts. The property owner intends to develop each tract with market rate multifamily housing. The petition site is located east of Boniface Parkway and south of East 32nd Avenue in Anchorage. The property is zoned R3SL, multiple family residential district with special limitations, and is subject to Assembly Ordinance 2014-130. Staff is recommending that the petitioner be required to construct Lee Street, which is adjacent to this site, to municipal standards, a 36-foot wide paved street, back of curb to back of curb, including type 2 rolled curb and gutter with a 5-foot wide sidewalk on both sides of the street. In addition, the petitioner should resolve with the non-motorized transportation coordinator and current planning section the need for a pedestrian facility connecting to Boniface Parkway. Being as though this is a relatively simple plat, that's all I have, so I'd like to recommend approval of the plat for 18 months, subject to the conditions listed on pages 10 and 11 of your staff packet.
Thank you. I would now, are there any questions for staff? I would like to open the public hearing now.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, my name is Tony Hoffman. I'm with the Boutte Company, and we are here to represent the petitioner in the case before us. We appreciate the staff's comments and all of their work with us on this. This is the second step in a process. We had a rezone that we did a couple months ago to R3. And while they're saying R2M, I don't know if the rezone's been finalized, but I know it was adopted and approved by the Assembly 2 weeks ago. So now we're working with an R3 piece of property. There is one comment that Mr. Whitfield just made that kind of caught me by surprise. We actually requested a 5-year phase plat. Yeah.
Okay.
But I don't think I want to really solely, this is a phase tract plat, which is the idea, and the number of units that we're going to put on this, we would not be able to do in 18 months. The first plat we would, of course, for tract 1 record in 18 months. I don't know how we can address that right now. That is kind of a something we might want to talk about before we're done here. We don't want it to be a killer for us tonight, though. While we appreciate and we're 100% behind all the staff conditions and recommendations, there are a couple of things as far as the history I wanted to talk about and let you know what's going on with the property. One of the comments that long-range planning had on page 7 was about the culverts, and Chester Creek runs through the property. It's fairly, it's not a real clean stretch of Chester Creek. It's a lot of logs, a lot of stuff on it, and every year, almost to the season, every spring there's flooding. Part of this process that we're going to undergo in phase 1, we're doing a FEMA map revision, which allows us to go in and upsize the culverts and clean up the culvert crossings and actually clean the stream and try to do away with some of the flooding that happens every year. It's an ongoing problem, and it's one of the first things the city pointed out to us when we came and talked to them about it. So that is one of the things we're undergoing right now is a FEMA flood revision. And the Corps permit, the Fish and Wildlife permit, the endangered species permits, we have to do them all. And there are actually fish that come up that far, so I've seen it. The other thing I wanted to point out is, as anybody that does development in Anchorage knows, working with trailer courts can be dicey, and there was known contamination in phase one when they got into it, and right now they've cleaned up all of tract one, and it's cost over, it's shot over the budget by tenfold. It's about $1 million in cleanup in phase one. So the developer is committed to continue the development and try to provide some good apartments in the next year. So with that, I'd like to hold my time that I have left for rebuttal and answer any questions.
You have 7 minutes for rebuttal.
Thank you.
Do we have any questions? Dan Porter.
Yes, I'm just interested in where the access to both Tract 1 and Tract 2 are envisioned.
Well, if you look on the track plat, which is, unfortunately we don't have a limo here anymore, so, well, it does, but it doesn't really work well, so I've kind of given up on that. But if you look on the plat well, you have a full size. Tract 1 will come right off onto Lee Street. Tract 2 will be tied into it with the existing bridge across the culverts you see going east-west on Chester Creek, and it'll tie into Tract 2, and there'll be another crossing that'll go across into east, what I have labeled as East 43rd, which will be either a bridge or a culvert crossing. And that'll provide that circulation. Tract 3 will be the last phase, and that will have more circulation that comes around and then comes back up to Lee Street.
So at some point in time, a traffic impact analysis.
Oh, the traffic impact analysis will have to be, we're providing that for the permit application next month, and it'll be completed. For phase one, we're not seeing off-site improvements, but there will, of course, for this phase, there will be substantial improvements on Lee Street because it is not significantly substandard, but it does have cracking and the curb and gutters in poor shape. And another big thing that's come up through public input and through conversations with the city and the non-motorized coordinator is the connection to Boniface, pedestrian connection, and we will be providing that. There's actually a sidewalk that comes along 43rd Street, what I have labeled as 43rd, and that's in the staff package, and we will be utilizing that and connecting to that and probably widening that. That's part of the resolve with non-motorized. We're going to have to clean up the pedestrian access to Boniface because there isn't really any good pedestrian access right now.
Thank you.
Brent Cole.
Thank you. You have the package in front of you. Could you just briefly address the public comment on page 53?
I believe I know which, I think it's the only comment that's in here.
Did you not get that?
Yeah, oh yeah. And this is part of how we're going to address that. This is an ongoing problem. In front of this property is the bus stop on Boniface. So one of the ways we're going to resolve that is improving the pedestrian access to Boniface. Right now, people just go right through that property. He doesn't have a fence around it. He's talked about us putting a 4-foot fence, but we're not going to commit to that. We are going to have landscaping that'll be required along Lee Street that will somehow control it. But unfortunately, people will go where they want to go. And if we provide a pathway or sidewalks, it doesn't mean they're going to use it necessarily, unfortunately. Yeah, we've heard Mr. Garrison's comments, vocally and in writing.
Mr. Whitfield.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To the board, I would like to, and I'm glad Tony pointed it out, with regard to the approval, being as though this is a phased development, and I apologize, Tony, I did miss that. I would like to amend my staff recommendation to include 2 small changes. I would like to, as my first action item A, I would like that to state approval of the phasing plan. And then as action item, which was A, I would like to make that item B. and that should be amended to state approval of the plat for 60 months, subject to the following conditions. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions for Dave Whitfield on that? Don Porter.
Back on the non-motorized pedestrian, it seems to me that that access would be addressed by the non-motorized review, correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you.
absolutely. And we've had conversations. We know what she wants. She wants that pedestrian access, and that's fine.
Any other questions? Okay. We'll open up to public testimony.
Okay, good evening, Chairman and Board. My name is Wes Soper, and I'm representing myself and Reflection community, the lake that I just moved into 4 months ago. So it's kind of new to me, and now I got a face with Dave's name over there, so that's great. I only have one concern, and we're looking forward to this project. To be honest with you, I am anyway, and I'm looking forward to being a good neighbor. I want to bring your attention to the Track 2 is going to butt up against the southeast Mirage Circle area there and the right-of-way. And my concern is that we don't turn that into a road into that community for the simple fact we have way too many kids in this community, and it will really be a detriment. We have a lot of humps there. Are they humps or bumps? I don't know what they call them. I get confused. But a lot of speed humps there, and access to from Defiance on to Tudor, that's just not going to be a really good program to go through the neighborhood when they're going to develop to the light on 34th to go down Boniface, which I recommend that. But some of the people that, we've been talking about, that's really concerned. But we would like a walking path there because we want to connect the communities, and we expect to have some interaction in that regard. One thing that we'd like to see there is emergency access gate for fire, police, or whatever, whether it's a bar that comes down or whatever, so that that community can be serviced by the emergency vehicles and the police department. But the TIA isn't done yet, and I went to Dave's office to try to talk to him so I can get up to speed on this stuff. But I'm looking forward to seeing that, but I really hope you put a lot of thought and concern into that area with all the kids and going through the neighborhood there. All righty, that's all I have.
Thank you. Any questions for Wes? I didn't catch your last name.
Soper, S-O-P-E-R.
Thank you.
All right, thank you so much.
Oh, I have a question for you. Don Porter?
Oh, I'm sorry, you have a question?
I would actually, more of a comment, I would encourage you to work with the municipality staff, because this is only the first step of a fairly long process, and the municipal staff have those items in mind that you're concerned about. But we're platting here.
All righty, thanks. Looking forward to that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, Dave Whitfield?
Through the chair, to the board, just kind of addressing Mr. Soper's comments, I believe the petitioner's representative has been working on those items and addressing those items with the municipal traffic department. So, your concerns are well taken, and I believe the petitioner has been working on that, and the traffic department is well aware of the concerns of the community.
Thank you. Any other members of the public wanting to speak? With that, we'll close the public. Would you like to rebut anything?
Not so much rebuttal. I do want to put on record that we do concur with Mr. Whitfield's revisions or additional action items, and it was as much a failing on our part to not catch that we had requested a phasing plan. If you look on the page 23, we actually have the phase sequence for the tracks on there. So, and in regard to Mr. Soper's comments, we're open to whatever the traffic engineer and the fire department wants. A crash gate, just pedestrian access. The TIA most likely won't require that access in a preliminary look at it. However, we're open to whatever the city wants. There's some issues in the city where they can't come to an internal agreement as well. And we're working with the city.
Thank you. With that, we'll close the public hearing, and I'm requesting a positive motion to approve the phase plan. Brent Cole, second by Don Porter.
In case number S12111, Bella Vista Anchorage subdivision, I move for approval of the petitioner's phasing plan.
Would you speak to your motion?
Based on the fact that this is a project to be phased over a number of years, the information submitted by staff, I believe that the evidence supports the approval of such a motion.
Any other comments? Don Porter.
I just wanted to follow up that I also am in support of the phasing plan as noted on the plat. In this case, number S12111, phase 1 is 2015, phase 2 is 2018, and phase 3 is 2021.
Thank you. Is there any opposition to the motion? Seeing no opposition, the motion passes. Can I have a motion approving the plat? Don Porter.
In case number S12111, I move per the department recommendations, and this will now be item B, for approval of the plat for 18 months, subject to the following conditions, which are stated 1 through 8 on pages 10 and 11. I move for approval of that based on those conditions.
Could we make that 60 months instead of 18?
Oh, is it 60 months?
Yes, please.
Then I'll revise the approval for 60 months, subject to the following conditions.
And Brent Cole seconds that. Would you speak to your motion?
I find in this case that the petitioner has followed all the procedures and is working directly with the municipality to resolve their concerns, and most certainly there are plenty to work through, and therefore 60 months seems reasonable in this case. And there are still a lot of steps to go. So,
any other findings from the board? Brent Cole.
I would just echo that and indicate that there was support. You know, as I'm always conscious of people that come forward. We think it's important that the public be involved in the process, but it looks like the petitioner, municipality, have indicated that they will work with them, and they've also addressed the public concern that's in our packet, so I intend to support this motion.
Thank you. Any other findings? I would like to add additional findings that the traffic analysis is scheduled for 2 weeks out, that the petitioner has acquiesced with the conditions stated, and that there's been no other opposition presented here today. Is there any opposition to the motion? Seeing no opposition, the motion passes. Do you need anything?
Case S121112 Eagle Crossing was postponed. Is there anyone here in the audience that was anticipating that? Great. The next case is case S12118 Sojourn Square. May we have staff's presentation, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This preliminary plat is a request for subdivision of 2 tracts of land into 43 lots with a variance from AMC 2180-240 design standards cul-de-sac length to allow Sojourn Circle to exceed the maximum cul-de-sac length of 600 feet in an urban area. The petition site is located east of Lake Otis Parkway, just north of Huffman Road. The property is zoned R1 Single Family Residential District. The petitioner initiated an application for rezoning in July to rezone the property from R6 Suburban Residential District to R1 Single Family Residential District. That application was approved by the Planning and Zoning Commission on August 4th and by the Assembly on November 18th. That would be yesterday. With regard to pedestrian facilities within this subdivision, the non-motorized transportation coordinator is requesting that a 10-foot walkway easements be dedicated between lots 35 and 36 of Adventure Circle and lots 19 and 20 of Sojourn Circle. These pedestrian connections will provide a safe and more convenient access from this neighborhood to schools. The road improvements associated with this development, Sojourn Circle would be required to be constructed to a 33-foot wide paved street back of curb to back of curb, including type 2 rolled curb and gutter with a 5-foot wide detached sidewalk with a separation distance of 5 feet from the back of curb on one side. Adventure Circle will be constructed to municipal standards consisting of a 30-foot wide paved street back of curb to back of curb, including type 2 rolled curb and gutter with a residential cul-de-sac having a 41.5-foot radius back of curb the entire length. As was stated earlier, the petitioner is requesting a variance from AMC 2180-240 design standards for cul-de-sac length to allow Sojourn Circle to exceed the maximum 600 feet. There are 4 standards required to be met for granting of a variance, and I'll go through each one separately. Standard number 1, staff finds this standard to be met. Huffman Road is classified as a minor arterial roadway, and access has been denied by the Alaska Department of Transportation. Because through access to Huffman Road cannot be achieved, this variance appears to be reasonable. Standard number 2, staff finds that this standard is met. Granting of this variance will not be detrimental to the public or injurious to the property in the area. Adequate access for emergency vehicles is provided with this subdivision. This development is projected to generate less than 400 trips per day, and this subdivision design appears to provide safe vehicular and pedestrian circulation. Standard number 3, staff finds that this standard is met. The intent of this section is to discourage, for safety reasons, development creating roads that end in long dead-end cul-de-sacs. While it's clear that this development does not meet the 600 feet allowed by AMC 2180-240, there does not appear to be a reasonable alternative. The State of Alaska Department of Transportation has prohibited access to this development from Huffman Road, and thus the longer cul-de-sacs appear to be a reasonable alternative. Standard number 4, staff finds that this standard is met. Undue hardship would result from the strict compliance with the subdivision regulations. Denial of this variance would effectively make the east portion of the property undevelopable, as access to Huffman Road has been denied by the state. So with that being said, staff would like to recommend approval of the variance from AMC 2180-240 to allow Sojourn Circle to exceed the maximum length of 600 feet for a cul-de-sac in the urban area, and approval of the plat for 18 months subject to the conditions on pages 12 and 13 of your staff packet. You may note that on page 12 of your staff packet, it is void of the approval of the variance, and so I'm adding that in as action item A, which moves the approval of the plat to action item B. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions of staff? Mr. Porter.
A little chatty tonight. I actually have a couple of questions in regards to the radius size on the circles and also the reasoning for not requiring a sidewalk on Adventure Circle. It looks like you have adequate radius, the same radius on both circles of 50 feet. That's on page 10 under road improvements.
Through the chair, Mr. Porter, these are comments that came from private development. The plat may indicate a 50-foot radius. However, it appears that a 41.5-foot radius is required by code, and so that's what the standard, the minimum standard that the municipality requires there. That would be a residential cul-de-sac. And with regard to the sidewalks will only be required along the main thoroughfare, which would be Sojourn, and then the cul-de-sacs would not require sidewalks. We would like the sidewalks, however, the code does not require it.
Thank you.
Mr. Walker.
Is there any plan or provision for any pedestrian walkways from this development into Huffman Road?
Through the chair, Mr. Walker, yes, as I stated in my staff presentation, it's not being provided with this subdivision by the petitioner. However, staff feels that that two pedestrian facilities, one for Adventure Circle and one for Sojourn Circle, should be required to basically move children out onto Huffman and the sidewalks there so that they can walk to school. It's a good, safe pedestrian access. It would move pedestrians in a good manner.
Are there any additional questions of staff? I have one. Mr. Whitfield, on page 12, item number B4, dedicate and construct a 10-foot walkway easements between the lots. So these are just, there's not going to be a trail, there's just going to be an easement. Is that correct?
Mr. Chairman, no, we are asking that the petitioner dedicate the easements and construct the walkways as part of under the subdivision agreement.
Okay, so they will be constructed under this plat.
We're asking for that. Yes.
Okay, thank you. Any additional questions of staff? Hearing and seeing none, we'll open the public hearing portion. Will the petitioner's representative please come forward, state your name, spell your last name for the record, please, and let us know if you'd like to reserve some time for rebuttal.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, my name is Jim Sawhill. I'm with Lounsbury & Associates, and I'm here tonight representing the applicant. I would like to reserve 4 minutes for rebuttal.
Thank you.
This is a request to subdivide 8.5 acres in 2 tracts into 43 lots. The property is located at the northeast corner of Huffman and Lake Otis. There's currently water mains, sewer, and storm drain available to the property in Lake Otis, and Lake Otis will also provide the primary access into the site. The property has been rezoned to R1 single family. That occurred last night, so the land use issue is done, and we can get on to the subdivision issue before us tonight. We agree with staff's conditions generally. We would like some modifications to 2 of those, and I have passed out the modifications that we would like, and I'd like to discuss those. First is condition of approval number 4, which deals with the dedication and construction of the trails to Lake Otis. If you will look at page 15 of your packet, it has the subdivision layout. The first change we would like to make is the trail to be constructed from Sojourn Circle to Huffman Road. We would like it to be between lots 18 and 19. AWW has required or requested us to provide a sewer easement for extending of utilities to the property to the west, so it'll be sewer service, and we would like to combine the trail easement with the sewer easement along that alignment. So we have no objection to constructing that pedestrian way off Sojourn Circle, and we would just like the alignment of that trail tweaked a bit. We would like the requirement to build a trail from Adventure Circle to Huffman deleted. We see the benefit of providing the trail at the end of the long cul-de-sac. We don't believe it's unreasonable to have people walk down Adventure to Lake Otis and think that additional connection would be redundant and not necessary. As far as providing access for children to the schools, the school in this area is Bowman Elementary School, and it is to the north and to the west of this. So their route to that school would be down Lake Otis Parkway, not necessarily along Huffman. In addition, with schools, once you have a major arterial, generally the school district doesn't consider that a safe walking route, so this will be an area that will continue to be bused. We don't believe that's necessary. The next amendment we would like to make is to condition 8F, and it's a pretty minor change. This property has conservation wetlands, sea wetlands on the property, so the wetland permit that will be required for this is a municipal general permit. So we have inserted before U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, authorization is required from the municipality of Anchorage or the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. We just wanted to make that clarification. It's our intent to get a general permit and pay the wetland mitigation fee to the Great Land Trust. We would just like that clarified for the record. The one issue we'll also hear tonight from the adjoining neighbor, again, if you look on page 15 of your packet, there is an adjoining tract to the east along Huffman Road that is currently zoned R6. It's a 2.5 acre tract, and what we will be providing by code. Code gives us a couple of options for transition and buffering, and one of the options is to provide a 15-foot buffer, and we will be providing a 15-foot buffer adjoining that 2.5 acre tract, and we will also be building a 6-foot high fence. We're also planning to build some fencing along Huffman Road and in Lake Otis to protect the development. Those fences aren't required by code, but it's something we want to go ahead and do and have a unified fence and a nice looking development. So those will be components of our development. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. You have 5 minutes and 30 seconds left for rebuttal. Are there questions for the petitioner's representative? Mr. Cole and then Mr. Porter. And Mr. Whitfield, did you have a question or comment? Okay, Mr. Cole.
So I'm not that familiar with this area, but are there bus stops along Huffman Road abutting this development?
I do not recall a bus turnout along Huffman Road, and I'm not familiar with the school routes along there either.
And looking at page 15, which you directed us to, as I understand it, the staff has recommended the walkway on lots 19 and 20, right?
Correct.
And then that, to get access, as I understood it, to Huffman.
Correct, and there is a pathway along Huffman Road on that side that we could connect
But
to.
your recommended change to that is 17 and 18, right?
No, it's 18 and 19. I'm sorry, did I get that wrong?
Yes.
I apologize, I have a typo in my request. We would like the easement between 18 and 19.
That makes more sense to me, because 17 and 18 didn't come out of
Yeah,
it.
that wouldn't have worked out well.
So it was going to be 19 and 20, now it's going to be 17 and 18.
Or
I
18
mean,
and 19.
18 and 19.
Yes,
And
Mr.
it'll
Cole.
still come out. So I don't quite get why you agree to put a walkway on Sojourn and not on the cul-de-sac above. I mean, is there a logic? Is there a reasoning behind that?
There
Are
is.
the people in the same position? They want access. It'd be nice to be able to walk to the road. Is there? I don't see the logic.
I believe Sojourn Circle, being a long street, having an additional alternative to come out to that street, is a good idea and makes sense. Easements between homes are both positive and negative. They're positive for the area and provide pedestrian circulation, but they do have negative impacts to the homes that are on each side of those. And some of people don't like trails next to them, and the people that bring into their yard, essentially. So in the case of
but they don't have to buy those two lots where the lot
that
is,
is
right?
that is correct.
There's 18 other lots that they could buy that don't have that.
Right. But it does affect the marketing of those lots. It does affect the resale of those homes.
But you could say that it increases the value of the other homes because it gives them access that they wouldn't
Sure.
otherwise have. So the other lots are more valuable because of that.
You could make that argument. It's an interesting argument. Again, we see the benefit for the longer street, and we had the discussion with Mr. Whitfield. We don't completely agree with it, and we see the one trail as a good compromise to provide enhanced pedestrian circulation, but still retain value.
And then I don't want to steal your thunder, but I don't understand could you explain to me the 50-foot, 41-foot circle? That's
Sure.
the requirement?
What we're going to provide is a 50-foot dedication. So the radius on the dedication will be 50 feet, and that's required by code. And the road we construct will have a 41.5-foot radius to the back of curb. So, typically on a 60-foot street, we build either 30-foot wide or 33-foot wide buildings. So there's right-of-way outside the curb and gutter, and that'll continue around the cul-de-sac.
Thank you.
Mr. Porter, then Mr. Whitfield, then Mr. Walker.
So I understand, are they going to be the same radius of back of curb?
On the cul-de-sac bulbs?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So explain the sewer easement to me. Is it possible that you could combine the sewer easement along 19 and 20 and work that out with AWWU?
I hadn't thought about that. What AWW is requiring us to do is to extend sewer for full frontage of this development with the intent of serving the lot to the east. So to meet that requirement, what we discussed with them was providing the sewer easement between 18 and 19, which is what they wanted. So being able to combine that with the trail easement, would be beneficial to AWW to have good access to their utility.
So let me stop you there. 18 and 19 goes out to Huffman right away.
Correct.
So how does that serve the lot to the east?
They can extend the sewer from there into their property when it redevelops.
The reason I'm asking is because I believe the shorter distance for the pedestrian, especially in the 10-foot tunneling sort of aspect that we're talking about, I think the shorter the better.
One of the benefits I see to that location is the sewer easement is actually 30 feet wide, and then we have a 10-foot trail on top of that. So the effective width that's available there and the tunneling effect will be much less if we follow the sewer easement.
Will they require the fences to be put along the easement and allow that 30 feet to be accessible to the pedestrians?
They typically are. I hadn't thought about that detail, if there would be any restriction on the fencing. That's definitely
Typically there wouldn't be. They would. The only thing that I would see is that they might have some discussion about the fence enclosing that.
Mm-hmm.
So if you put it 15 feet to a side, they'd still get full use of their lot and only a manhole possibly within the easement. So it would not have a very detrimental effect, in my opinion, to have the easement even along 17 and 18. Anyway. So my other question comes to Adventure Circle. I really think, and I want your comment on this, that lots 40, 39, and 38, 30, 31, and 32, 33, and of course, even those that are abutting Huffman, aren't those guys going to have to walk all the way around to get to Huffman? If they're walking to Huffman?
Yes, they will.
And so, to me, if they're truly going to be walking on the pathways, that if that reasoning implies for sojourn, I think that same reasoning applies. I don't know. Just an opinion.
I think it's a shorter distance, and again, we just believe that the compromise, essentially, to provide one access is a good solution. And I understand your point of trying to provide pedestrian connectivity, but again, there is detrimental portions for the people that butt up against those walkways.
Thank you.
Mr. Whitfield and then Mr. Walker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to address Mr. Sahill's amendments here, and I'll start with the change to condition number 4. The reason why staff believes that 2 pedestrian facilities is necessary is because, one, the only crosswalk in this area is at the intersection of Huffman and Lake Otis. Mr. Sahill said that Bowman Elementary was the school in this area, and that's correct. However, if you go out to Lake Otis, you're not going north on Lake Otis. You're actually going south on Lake Otis to hit the intersection at Lake Otis and Huffman, and you'll cross there. So providing an access to Huffman, which gets you to the corner of Huffman and Lake Otis much quicker, it seems much shorter, much safer. To expand on that point, the petitioner is not providing pedestrian sidewalks within Adventure Circle, and so to route pedestrian traffic through Adventure Circle and out onto Lake Otis does not seem reasonable. It seems much more reasonable and safe to provide that walkway out to Huffman where there is a detached sidewalk and that the pedestrians can walk safely. So those are my comments on, on condition number 8, or I'm sorry, on condition number 4. With regard to condition number 8, staff is really not prepared to address the amendment there. So what I would propose to do is make the need for that plat note a resolve comment with watershed management. I believe they are the ones that actually, no, I'm sorry, I take that back. I believe that is a long-range planning comment, and so I would make that a resolve comment and let long-range determine if the amendment is appropriate or not, as staff tonight is not
prepared to speak to the amendment.
Thank you. Mr. Walker.
First, with respect to the resolve comment, who would you like us to resolve that with?
Through the chair, Mr. Walker, with the long-range planning section.
Thank you. With one of the questions I had, are there any other walkway easements in the surrounding properties that were reserved, such as at Rolling Meadow, Rushwood Circle, or at Woodchase Drive?
No, there was no trail easements out the end of those cul-de-sacs.
That's all I have. Thanks.
Thank you. Any additional questions? Mr. Cole.
I'm sure, but I just want to follow up on this. There's no requirement of AWW easement on the Adventure Circle, right?
No.
It's just the one?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Any additional questions? I have one for staff. On Sojourn Circle, moving the trail to between lot 18 and 19, what's staff's position on that?
Mr. Chairman, I kind of I feel that it poses some problems to overlap the utility easement with the walkway easement. As Mr. Porter pointed out, it's more than likely that fences will go up within that easement, and I have some concerns there. I would prefer to see it placed between the two lots as indicated in the staff report. However, if the board sees that that it's adequate to provide the walkway, to include that utility easement, then staff would not object to that.
Thank you. And if the easement remains between lot 19 and 20 and fences, would fences not be able to go up there, or would it just be a shorter distance to walk between the fences?
I hope I understand exactly what you're saying, Mr. Chairman. The fences would be located on property but outside of the 10-foot easement as requested by staff. If it were to be where Mr. Sawhill is proposing, it's more than likely that the fences would be within the 30-foot utility easement as requested by AWW. So typically the way that we would handle that is that the petitioner would get letters of non-objection from the utility. I'm not sure that AWU would be issuing a letter of non-objection for that. So I'm not necessarily opposed to placing the walkway there, but I see that poses some potential problems. I would prefer to see it where it was recommended by staff.
Thank you. And Mr. Cole.
This is for staff through the chair. So I have a question. Is this petition under the new code or the old code?
Through the chair, Mr. Cole, this is a petition under the old code.
Okay. And is there a difference between the old code and the new code as far as pedestrian plans?
Through the chair, Mr. Cole, no. This is basically implementing the pedestrian plan, so that plan has not changed.
Between the old
and the new, that's correct.
Thank you.
Any additional questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
We're going to close the public hearing portion.
No.
Oh, no, we're not. We're going to leave it open, and we're going to have testimony from the public. Thank you. My mistake, and apologies. State your name for the record. Spell your last name, please.
My name is John Henry, Henry, and I appreciate this opportunity to speak to the board. I contest the idea of the walkway going between 18 and 19. This was just news to me because I'm representing my dad's property, who is just to the east of that, which is a 2.5-acre parcel. And what it would do is dump a bunch of kids or people and everything very close, on a very close proximity to his property. And number one, there are horses on this property, and it would cause some issues to have a bunch of kids walking out there. So I think a little further down is more appropriate. Also think that they should have multiple walkways, access to Huffman and also Lake Otis. Other than that, I have nothing else. The other thing that I would like to contest here is the density of the units. They're asking for 43 units, and I don't think that conforms to what the Huffman Community Council and those folks want to try to do over there to try to reduce some of the density as they transition into R6 lots and the R7 lots. If you look around the properties, the densities that the way I calculate them, to the northeast, they show about 35 units. To the north, there's 41. Across Lake Otis, there's 38, and there's a density of probably 34 behind my father's place, which is the 2.5-acre parcel there. And if you divide that out, that's what it comes to. So I think a lot of the problems that you guys are running into with some of these issues is the density problem here. And I would like to see that reduced to 4 units per acre, which would produce a density of 34 and would be more harmonious with the surrounding area. And if you calculate their existing density at 43, if you divide the acreage out by 5, you'll find it's in excess of 5. It's 5.03, and if you calculate that out, it comes out to 42.7 lots. So they're going to try to put a house on a 0.7 lot somehow. But I think larger lots would produce a better harmony in the neighborhood. I think it would be easier to address some of the easement problems to the public roads and the system, because this is a very congested area. The people flying up and down Huffman, it's a 50-mile-an-hour zone up and through there. So there are some issues there. And that's all I have to say. I wish you would consider the number of units per acre. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there questions for Mr. Henry?
You have a question? I'm sorry.
There aren't any, but I would like to point out that the density is a function of planning and zoning. It's not a function of platting, which is tonight.
Well, I think I'm a little late on all this stuff. I'm kind of behind the 8 ball, so it showed up on this planning staff analysis platting, and it says that they want 43 lots, and I don't know how that calculates. So, but it is in excess of 5, which they voted on last night, and I was here last night and aired my views on that also. Thank you.
You're welcome. Is there anyone else wishing to testify tonight? State your name for the record, please, and spell your last name, please.
Linda Ritchie, excuse me, my braces get in the way. Linda Ritchie, R-I-T-C-H-E-Y. Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the Commission. I've lived in my current home for just shy of 28 years, raised 2 boys there, and if they will get busy, I hope to have a few grandchildren come to my home. It directly backs up to this subdivision on the north border. And you'll have to excuse me, I always get a little nervous when I'm addressing a group, but I get over it eventually. Okay, so I don't want to waste my 3 minutes of time, and the issues that are concerning to me are the issues of drainage. I've lived there a long time. That area has a lot of drainage problems. I think the municipality is well aware of them because they had a truck stationed out on Lake Otis on the west side there for years, not months, but years, trying to fix the drainage there. And I really appreciate the staff's concern and efforts to protect the neighboring homeowners from the drainage issues. But I would just like to reiterate that those are really important issues to me and the other property owners that back up against that. So I'd like that to be a special consideration. And along with that, I see that there is a suggestion to have a 10-foot buffer area of non-disturbed vegetation, which I appreciate, but I don't think it's quite wide enough. And I would like to suggest that a 20 to 25-foot buffer be considered, partly because a lot of the vegetation, I'm assuming most of the vegetation that would make a difference there would be trees, and a lot of the mature trees are vulnerable right now, especially once the soil and the root systems are going to be disturbed. We're already losing some to the windstorms and that kind of thing that happen. The buffer zone also will protect my property values in the event that that subdivision does not choose to adopt at least as stringent covenants as we have in our subdivision. I didn't know that when they developed the Rolling Hills subdivision. I didn't know to ask for a buffer zone between my property and theirs, but a 10-foot buffer zone is just not enough unless the petitioner would be willing to plant at least 5-inch diameter trees at a space of every 15 feet along the border to protect that. Do I get to reserve some time for rebuttal?
Unfortunately, you don't.
Okay.
You need to wrap up. Are you complete?
Yes.
Thank you. Are there questions for Ms. Ritchie? Thank you.
Thank you.
And Mr. Whitfield, did you have a, okay, thank you.
Good evening. My name is Kaylee Thompson, and I own 2 horses on my grandfather's property just east of the petition site. My biggest concerns are, 1, the trail going through to Huffman, because that will, as you know, bring children closer to my property, my grandfather's property, and my horses, which creates a liability for not only myself, but for parents as well. As you know, children are curious, and when there are horses around, they will come on the property regardless of no trespassing signs. A second issue that I have with this development is also the vegetation easement. I would like to see a greater vegetation easement as well, as my horses are on that back side of my grandfather's property. So it will decrease the value of these homes that are up and coming, as my horses are right there. And I think those are my 2 biggest concerns. And also, we had spoke last night about the fence possibly going up, and I don't think a 6-foot fence is tall enough. I would really like to see a 10-foot fence. I know that along the north side of my grandfather's property, there is a 10-foot fence rather than 6, and I think that that would be something that should be considered as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there questions? Thank you. Oh, excuse me. There is one.
Okay.
Mr. Porter has a question for you.
Okay.
So on the fence question, you're referring to the lot that is directly east, and it's abutting 15, 16, 17, and 18?
Yes.
And so I guess, and maybe a question to someone, is there no 10-foot buffer required on the east boundary, and yet there is a 10-foot buffer required on the north boundary? I'm not seeing that anywhere.
I am aware that it should be a 15-foot buffer between my grandfather's property and the property up and coming, a 10-foot vegetation buffer. That is what I understand from last night, but it may be different, 15. But I would like to see it 20 or maybe even 25, if at all possible, because like we already stated, 43 houses is a lot on that 8.5 something acres, and my horses are right there. And not only are they an eyesore, but they're not really an eyesore, but I mean, who wants to live right next to horses?
So I would also ask you about the children. I mean, essentially, you've got a trail that runs right along Huffman, correct?
Yes.
So you've already got that issue, right?
Not necessarily, because there is not a high-density population right now. There's nothing developed towards the west of my property now. So there is not a lot of foot traffic, whereas when these houses are developed, it's going to bring a great number of families, a great number of children, and the foot traffic will be a lot heavier.
Okay.
So something to keep in consideration.
Mr. Walker.
How large of a buffer area do you have on your property?
Right now, my arena is 10 feet from the property line.
And what do you have planted in that area?
Natural growth, natural vegetation.
And
But as stated earlier, a lot of it will depreciate when the ground is developed.
And how tall is the fence you guys have for your horses there?
My fence, it is not a solid fence. It is a typical equine fence, so it is 4 slots, and it is about 6 to 6.5 feet tall. Might be a little taller. But like I said, it is an open fence. It is not a fully enclosed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a question for you.
Of course.
You're asking, or you're requesting that we don't allow, I want to be specific because
Okay.
A trail, are you opposed to the trail on Sojourn Circle between lots 19 and 18 or between 19 and 20? Or are you opposed to any access from Sojourn to Huffman, any trail access?
I am definitely opposed to a trail coming between 19 and 18, as that would be very close to my property line. 20 and 19 I could deal with. I understand that children do need access to Huffman, as it would be safer to cross at the intersection of Huffman and Lake Otis. But the farther I can get them from my property, the better. Because as it is now, I have children coming onto the property, even though there are no trespassing signs posted.
Thank you. Are there any additional questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else wishing to testify tonight?
Good evening. My name is Brandy Pennington, and I just have some brief comments I'd like to share. In regard to trail access, if you're familiar with Huffman Road, you may have noticed that there are several transient persons that walk up and down that street at any given time of the day, at night, and in early morning. I believe that they are being housed, or they may live in some type of group transitional home or some type of, I'm not sure where they come from. For all I know, they could be sleeping in the woods. But they're there, and they've been there consistently for 2 years. And my concern as someone who could intend to purchase a home in this neighborhood, that I personally, as the mother of 2 young children and being home quite frequently on my own, would not want additional trail access for people to just cut through. And just to be straightforward with you, my in-laws live on Rolling Meadow, and so this neighborhood is very attractive to me because that's right next door. I have several friends on Rolling Meadow, and I know they're in support of the same type of development because they have family members that they would like to live close to. They're also concerned for the amount of traffic that would come through, just cutting through. Does that make sense? So like when I walk over to my in-laws, if I can find a shortcut, I'll take it. But if I lived in that neighborhood, I wouldn't want random people coming, just cutting through as using it as access, which is likely what will happen if you include true trail systems. People don't buy property in cul-de-sacs to have through traffic, right? They buy property in cul-de-sacs because they want only, pardon me, not through traffic. They only want people who are coming to the cul-de-sac for a particular reason in the cul-de-sac. Does that make sense? They're not looking for people to just access it to cut through for trail access. I think that having 2 trails is a little extensive. And I know that the lot issue isn't something that's addressed in front of this committee, but I would like to say that affordable housing in Anchorage is hard to come by, and if you make those lots larger, then the homes become more expensive, and that's not what people are looking for. In addition to that, I really appreciate how poised the young lady was here, but the bottom line is her horses are going to die someday. She's going to move on and grow up. And those horses are going to, or probably won't be there in the future, but people are going to be there. People are going to look for homes to live in. And quite frankly, if she's in an R6, then she may need a conditional use permit for the horses anyway. So I appreciate the effort that you put into your presentation. It was very impressive, but I don't think it's relevant to consider comparing one young woman's horses to a neighborhood of people who need affordable housing. And so I know that may sound crass, but it's been a long day, and I'm just putting everything on my head right out in front of you. Any questions?
Thank you. Are there questions? Mr. Cole.
So
As I understand it, as a prospective buyer, your belief is that people don't like to have access and don't like, I mean, there are some people that use buses, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they need to walk to Huffman and maybe catch a bus, and it would be your thoughts that it would not be attractive to prospective homeowners to have access, easy access to buses for those people who are, like you say, needing affordable housing and can't afford big houses and maybe can't afford cars, but they shouldn't get easy access to our transit system.
So your transit system actually picks up in front of Cars on Huffman, which is 2 or so miles away from where the proposed development is. So I don't think...
Bus stops in the area at all?
Not that I can think of. No, they've cut bus service to the hillside dramatically. Yeah, in fact, I know for a fact because I had some people who did take the bus staying with me this summer, and I would drop them off every morning at 9 a.m. to catch the bus by Cars on Huffman, the gas station.
But doesn't that assume that the bus service will never expand? We won't have transit systems out there? Don't we want to encourage people?
Oh, totally. Yeah. You know what? I biked to work for years, so I'm all about encouraging walking pathways and so forth. But what I'm saying is that most people who choose to live in a cul-de-sac are not attracted to additional walk-in features. It's a safety and security issue.
Well, I might beg to differ on that, but I appreciate your...
Yeah, totally. Well, then there's a second cul-de-sac. You can live there too.
Thank you. Are there any additional questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Is anyone else from the public wishing to testify tonight? Anyone at all? Mr. Sahil, you have 5 minutes and 30 seconds for rebuttal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, my name is Jim Sawhill. I'd like to address a few of the issues that were brought up in the testimony. First, as far as the density of the overall development goes, we are developing the lots in conformance with the minimum standards for an R1 zone. So the density we're proposing does, meet the requirements of Title 21 and is appropriate for this location and it fits in well with the neighborhood. We do understand that there's horses next door currently. We are proposing again to build a fence adjoining that R6 lot. There is just one dwelling unit on that 2.5 acres. That fence will help to provide a buffer in conjunction with the 15-foot buffer easement that we'll be providing there. And is basically required by code. In old Title 21, they give us options for transition and buffering between R1 and R6. And what's in the code, one of the options is a fence and a 15-foot buffer. So that's the option we have chosen and meets the requirements of Title 21. I'm not sure I agree with the issue that shifting the trail down between 19 and 18 will encourage additional kids to enter the lot and interact with the horses. If the kids get to the bike trail on Huffman Road, whether the alignment staff wants or the alignment we would prefer, I think the issue is the same. I don't see it as a big concern. Regarding the suggestion that we should increase the height of the fence from 6 feet to 10, 6 feet is a pretty standard height for a wood fence and I think appropriate at this location. The testimony concerning drainage on our north boundary, we are aware of the drainage issues that are there. The lots to the north of us essentially built up and filled those lots and blocked the drainage. So our property drains to, I guess, from the southeast corner to the northwest. So we will be preparing a drainage study for our development in conformance with municipal regulations. We're anticipating a drainage swale along our north boundary to intercept those problem areas and direct drainage to Lake Otis. Again, we're aware of that problem and we're prepared to solve that. The suggestion that there should be any kind of a buffer easement on our north property, Again, they're zoned R1, we're zoned R1. Typically, we don't provide buffers between like zoning. There was a suggestion in the staff packet that maybe we should provide that, but it's not currently a condition of approval as it's not required by code. Just to summarize, I understand there's some concerns among the board on our suggestion to shift the pedestrian access and eliminate the one. And again, I feel it's a good proposal. I think it meets the requirements of the code and is reasonable, and I hope you can support our amendment to condition number 4. Staff's suggestion that we change the condition 8F as to a resolve. We have no objection to that change, and we feel we can work with staff to get that done. And with that, if you have any additional questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you. Are there any additional questions? Mr. Porter.
I just have one. So what there is on sheet 2 of 3, there is some sort of easement shown, but it's not labeled as to what it is. Is it a utility easement on the north?
It's a telephone and electric easement.
So it's a utility easement?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Do you have a question? I have a comment on the drainage to the north. I think it could be somewhat problematic. However, what I'm looking at the drainage map, it seems as if Sojourn Circle is going to intercept almost all of the water that's moving northwest. And so the only water moving toward the northern boundary would be on lots 1 through 10 probably.
Yes.
And I think a swale probably could handle that.
Right.
So that
the bigger issue is the lots to the north. Their backyards do drain onto our property, and so we need to really pick up that drainage. And as you pointed out, that row of lots, our backyard drainage will be back there too. So we need to gather that up and deal with it effectively.
And I disagree with, I believe it's staff, some of staff's comments that a 10-foot vegetation buffer there may allow adequate infiltration. That's probably, those soils probably wouldn't handle that.
Not with the soils we have.
But I think your idea of having a swell would be appropriate.
Yeah.
That's the only questions or comments I have. So any additional comments or questions? I'm sorry, yes, you did. You only get to testify once. I apologize. No additional questions. Thank you very much. The public hearing portion is closed, and the matter now rests with the board. Do we have, well, if there are no questions of staff, may I have a positive motion, please? For the variance, Mr. Walker.
I move to approve the variance request from AMC 2180-240 with respect to the length of a cul-de-sac.
Thank you. Mr. Porter seconds. Will you speak to your motion, please?
I believe that there are special circumstances and conditions affecting the property in this area that make development impractical otherwise without having a longer cul-de-sac, in that the property has no legal access to Huffman Road. They're limited to just Lake Otis. Huffman is a minor arterial. I think that the granting of a specific variance will not be detrimental to the public or avoid the purpose of the regulation. The number of traffic trips that are expected from this neighborhood is less than 400 trips a day, and safe vehicular traffic should be available with this plan, and undue hardship would result if they were required to have more access points onto Lake Otis. I also think that that would probably put the too much traffic there too close to the Huffman-Lake Otis intersection.
Thank you. Is there any opposition or discussion or additional findings? No additional findings, no discussion, and no opposition. The motion carries and the variance is approved. May I have a motion for approval of the plat for 18 months, subject to conditions, please? Mr. Walker.
As to case S12118, Sojourn Square subdivision, I move for the approval of the plat for 18 months, subject to the conditions 1 through 9 as stated in the planning staff analysis, with the following amendments. One is that paragraph 4 would state that the circle would be between 35 and 36, and then of 19 and 18. And then with respect to item 8F, that the petitioner would resolve with long-range planning, condition 8F.
Mr. Walker, on Mr. Porter's seconds, I have a question on your motion. On number 8, are you referring to resolve with long-range planning the 8F as supplied by the petitioner in the amendment, or 8F as in the original?
I think I was going to go ahead and have it in the original.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Porter seconds. Mr. Walker, will you speak to your motion, please?
Well, I believe that the density has already been approved by planning and zoning. It meets the R1 zoning standard, and so no change on that should be made. With respect to the request for fencing between this parcel and the parcel to the north, I think that the standard provided by the regulations with a 15-foot buffer and a 6-foot fence should be adequate. It's no larger of a fence than the person to the north already has. And I also think a taller fence in this circumstance would cause too much shading and reduce the plant growth in people's backyards. I vote in favor of shifting the trail from directly square between those two original lots, 19 and 20, to 18 and 19 as being an economically rational decision. I happen to live on a cul-de-sac. It is on a joint utility easement, a trail easement. It is 30 feet wide. The fences are outside the 30 feet. I like that approach. It works very nicely. One neighborhood down from mine has the narrow tunnel of 10 feet, and the fences are right there. And it isn't as hospitable of a location. I, living in a cul-de-sac, find and moved there because it did have trail access. I like the trail access. It's used by people in my neighborhood from as far away as a half a mile, 3/4 of a mile. They come there just because it has access to destinations that they want to go to, both across major arterial and along a creek. I think that having the trail on both locations, at Adventure Circle and Sojourn, is helpful. I think that the kids in the neighborhood will like being able to ride their bike around on their street, just going around the block, and without having to cross a major road. And I'm not particularly concerned about the lot being, that trail being any closer to those horses than it would be if it was one away. I think that the neighborhood people should have access and opportunity to get to see those horses. With respect to the drainage, I think that the drainage plan and the actions are being addressed there in this plat. I think that pretty well covers why I'm motivated to vote in favor of this motion.
Thank you. Mr. Cole and then Mr. Porter.
Well, let me say before we started, I didn't intend to vote for this because I didn't believe that we should change what staff has recommended. Given Mr. Walker's comments, I do. My personal belief is that we should encourage pedestrian access and make these places available. I don't know what the public transit system is. I don't know. We've got some testimony on that there's not a bus, but my sense is that the pedestrian plan should encourage that. I think that this does encourage people to walk out to get to the arterial roads, to have access. I'm not sure I agree, as I noted, that it makes the properties any less valuable. I think it makes the other properties around more valuable. I considered the petitioner's suggestion that they only have one walkway, which I just did not agree with the rationale that only one walkway was necessary. Under the circumstances, it seems to me it ought to be two or none. And my vote is two, and the petitioner was agreeable to one of them, so it just made sense to make it both cul-de-sacs accessible. I do want to say a couple things to the public, everybody that's here. We appreciate everything you say. We know that sometimes the decisions we make don't satisfy you. It's important that you're a part of the public process and that we do listen. I do. I take these comments personally. I know how difficult it is for people to get up here and talk. But to the young woman that talked, I empathize with you, but Anchorage is growing. Anchorage is developing. People need houses. Your grandfather's lot has probably been one of the most favorite times of your life. I appreciate that. But developers here are entitled to develop their property. I may not agree with what they're doing, but what they're doing is meeting the minimums, which is our requirement to make sure that they meet the minimums. I would hope and expect that the developer will reach out to you, maybe that there's a way to resolve some of the issues that you've raised. And so I would encourage you at this stage to learn how to try to solve problems. There are ways to resolve the issues that you're raising. And I suspect that the developer wants to have good neighbors. It wants to sell properties to people that are going to be good neighbors, and they want to have good relationships with the people next door. So if you can be reasonable and not put the whole burden on the developer, because that's what everybody's basically come in and said. We want the developer to pay for everything, and we want the developer to do everything. What I'm telling you is just try to be reasonable in your demands and what your access is. And, maybe it won't work out. I can't make any predictions about that. But I do know that most of the people want to see positive relationships among neighbors and neighborhoods. So I would urge you to think about that and reach out. But again, I appreciate all the testimony, the things that have been said. I appreciate staff and the job that you've done in this case. But this is just kind of a sign of progress within the municipal bowl, and I think that we all have to learn to kind of change a little bit. It's not going to be the same as we've always had it, and we just need to keep working toward a little more modernization. But I'm going to vote for this.
Thank you. Mr. Porter.
So I agree with what you're saying, Mr. Cole, and I also was a little conflicted about these pedestrian accesses, and I understand what your concerns were about the cut-through traffic. And so one thing that I see is if staff recommended the two, so they've made the recommendation to have access, it seems like they shouldn't short Adventure Circle if they're going to put that requirement on Sojourn Circle. So from that aspect, I would almost support an all or nothing on that. But so then, we have, I would see the recommendation for two, and that's what I like to see. The one thing that tosses me up, and originally I was seconded, and now I withdrew my second, because I am concerned about moving it from 19 to 18, moving the Sojourn Circle access. If it were set in stone that it was going to be a 30-foot wide access with fences on both sides and not the tunneling, I would be inclined to improve that, and maybe we can have a motion to make that work, so that it doesn't get into that situation where they say, yeah, we're going to combine the two easements. And we're doing that because you'll end up with a 30-foot wide corridor, and then somebody figures out that they don't have to do that, and they flip it back to, only 10 feet wide. Now the access is longer. So that's my concern with making the access longer. The shorter, the better, especially if it's only 10 feet wide. So unless we can modify it, I don't plan to support this motion as it stands.
Thank you. So with Ms. Enix is going to second this motion. So, Mr. Porter, would you like to make a motion to amend this motion, and then we can vote on your amendment?
So I'd like to make a motion that if they have to have a 30-foot wide easement, then it should be, then the pedestrian easement along 18 and 19 should also be 30 feet wide.
Is there a second for this motion?
Well, no, I'm waiting. Somebody got to second it first.
If we don't have a second, well, then we can't vote on it. If we have a second, we can discuss it, and then we can vote on it. Mr. Cole is going to second it. So,
but I want to ask a question.
Before you do, let's let Mr. Porter speak to his motion, and then you can ask your question. Okay. And then I'll ask mine. Mr. Porter, would you speak to your motion, please?
As I stated before, I don't like the tunneling effect, and so therefore the 10 feet narrowing, the shorter the better. If it were to be approved to move it to the longer, then I think we should widen the easement and combine it with the AWW requirement.
Thank you. Mr. Cole.
Well, one of the problems I have a little bit with that is that the petitioner never got a chance to talk about that or address that issue. I mean, they knew about the 30-foot on Sojourn, but they didn't know that we would require it this way, and I find it a little bit unfair that we're making this without giving them the opportunity to talk about it or to tell us whether they agree or disagree, which I assume they're going to disagree. But my question is to staff. Can we do that? Can we make it a 30-foot easement? I mean, can we really do that?
Through the chair, Mr. Cole, yes, you can do that. However, as you've already stated, the petitioner has not had the opportunity to speak to that amendment. It's not been offered. It wasn't offered earlier in the night, and I feel like at this point it's somewhat inappropriate to offer such amendment. That's my honest opinion.
Thank you. So I have a question, Mr. Porter. You're suggesting, or excuse me, as your amendment is a 30-foot easement between lots 18 and 19, and a 30-foot easement between 35 and 36?
No, only between 18 and 19 if we move it. If it stays at 19 to 18, I mean 19 to 20, it's shorter, and that's fine. But if the motion that we're having right now is to flip it to 18 to 19 in between those two lots, then that creates the longer path, and that's why I disagree with it.
Thank you. Mr. Whitfield.
Through the chair, Mr. Porter, just for clarification's sake, what you're proposing is to basically overlap the AWU easement and the walkway easement, basically expanding the walkway or widening the walkway easement out to 30 feet. Is that correct?
That's correct, because I've heard here today that everybody's expectation is that if there's a 30-foot wide AWW easement, then people might put their fences on it, or they might not. And they might figure out that they can just put it up to the 10-foot, and then we get the longer tunnel.
So I have a question of staff. If we approve this amendment, is there any prohibition from putting fences inside the 30-foot easement so that the fences are not 30 feet apart but are less than 30 feet apart?
Mr. Chairman, fences and easements are prohibited unless otherwise approved by the utility. So they would have to basically get a letter of non-objection to place the fences within the easement. So yes, they are out there, but certainly we don't like to see them. I don't think that AWU likes to see them. It makes it more difficult to maintain their facilities. So,
thank you. Is there any additional discussion? Is there opposition to the amendment? You want to vote? We could put it to vote.
Well, I mean, I have a little more discussion.
Mr. Cole.
We don't want to hear from the petitioner about this?
Can we hear from them?
Or can we not hear from them?
Well, just one moment. For staff, for clarification, I know the public hearing portion is closed. And so if that's final, that's final. But could we hear from the presenter?
the public hearing is closed. If you need an opinion from the petitioner, if this is something that the board is considering, then I suggest you bring the petitioner up.
That means reopen it?
No, we can't reopen the public hearing. But the matter rests with the board.
Got it.
But you can ask his opinion if you wish.
I would like to do that.
Okay, Mr. Cole.
Does the petitioner have an opinion about this? No.
I'm sorry, it's too late, and the only right way you can address the board is if we address you first and request that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It was our intention that there would be a 10-foot trail easement and then the 30-foot sewer easement. Mr. Porter, I hadn't considered the fencing issue until you brought it up and had a chance to consider it. We would, if fences would be built, it's the answer you're not going to want to hear, I would see that they could be as close as on the 10-foot trail easement, and so it would create the tunneling effect you're concerned about, but we would object to any prohibition on fencing within the sewer easement. Again, that would take a permit from AWW to do that, but we would like that flexibility to go ahead and do that. So I guess I would suggest, if this is a huge issue for you, that you should move the trail back to the other location. and then go with that. But I would really prefer that the motion as it's made go forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Are any additional questions or comments? Hearing and seeing none, the motion in front of us at this moment is actually an amendment. And Mr. Porter, before we vote, if we're going to vote, would you state the amendment again, and then we can decide to, if we're going to vote or just... Well, you can withdraw your amendment, and then you can give us a new amendment.
So I'm going to withdraw the amendment request and create a new motion that we move it back to the staff recommendations between 19 and 20.
And Mr. Rebel seconds. So the amendment is now that we follow staff's recommendations. Mr. Whitfield.
Through the chair, to the board, I just want to get clarification on this. The petitioner is offering an amendment to amend a condition of approval. What's on the floor here is to adopt the staff recommendations. Is that correct? I know we're specifically talking to one of the walkway easements, but I want to ensure that that we are offering amendment to approve both walkways. That's important in this, I think.
It's my understanding that that's part of the original motion, and the amendment is only to move it from between 18 and 19 to move it to between 19 and 20. That's how I understand the amendment. Does that answer your question, Mr. Whitfield?
Mr. Chairman, no. I think the original motion on the floor was to adopt staff's recommendation with the change of moving the walkway to the lots between lots 18 and 19. Mr. Porter made the amendment to that to move it back to staff's recommendation. But I want to ensure that what Mr. Porter is making the amendment to is concerning only that walkway, and that the walkway within Adventure Circle will remain as staff has recommended.
So that requires clarification from Mr. Porter. Mr. Porter, will you address that, please?
So I'll make sure that I'm clear. So my amendment to the proposal is that we, item 4, we dedicate and construct 10 feet walkway easements between lots 35 and 36 of Adventure Circle and lots 19 and 20 of Sojourn. That is the amendment to this on the table.
Thank you. Mr. Walker. Did you have a... Okay. Before we vote on this, I want to offer or ask a question, I guess. Over the weekend, the American Association of, or American Planners Association had a workshop here in Anchorage that I attended, and during that attendance, one of the items that came up was that the planning commissions and platting boards have somewhat of an obligation to follow the comprehensive plans, and in this case we have a pedestrian plan with goals, and if we don't follow this plan, which we have the latitude to do, we need a good reason. And the reason offered by the petitioner is that it would inconvenience two property owners and decrease the value on two properties. And one member of the public stated that it might let transients into the neighborhood. But I'm going to read the goals, which are part of the pedestrian plan, that I'm going to support this plan. And goal number 1 is to create a safer, more walkable city that will encourage winter pedestrian activity and make walking a safer and more attractive activity. And I believe that 2 accesses, as we're about to vote on, complies with goal number 1. Goal number 4 is to improve community connectivity by providing safe, convenient, year-round pedestrian routes within and between neighborhoods, commercial centers. And I believe that the intent of 2 walkways that staff is recommending complies with this. And this, again, doesn't have anything, neither of these goals state access to schools. Policy 4.1 is provide pedestrian walkway and trail connections in all subdivision plats for access to schools and between neighborhoods. And if this isn't directly to schools, it's certainly between neighborhoods. But as stated by Mr. Whitfield, that this would go to the nearest crosswalk, which would be access to schools. So I believe that it's appropriate to put these trails in as staff is recommending. And then policy 4.4 is identify and preserve connectivity provided by existing platted easements for walkways and trails. And goal number 6 is to encourage development patterns that increase and enhance pedestrian use. And policy 6.1 is promote land use and site design that make walking convenient and enjoyable. So it seems to me that what we're about to vote on and what has been recommended by staff complies with the policies. It makes sense for the higher good of many people rather than the inconvenience of two potential lot owners. So I'm going to support that we put the 2 trails as the motion. Mr. Whitfield, did you still have a comment? Is there any additional comments? Or is there? Is there any opposition to the motion? Mr. Rubella has seconded it. There's no opposition, so the motion passes, or excuse me, the amendment passes, and now we're to the motion. Is there any opposition to the motion? Hearing and seeing none, the motion carries, and it's approved. Thank you. Okay. The next item is persons to be heard. I don't believe there's anybody to be heard tonight. Actually, there is, but I'll do this under reports. Under reports, I have a report from the chair, and it's probably going to take about maybe 10 minutes. It's 9 o'clock right now. Does anybody want to take a break, or do you want me to just proceed and then we'll smoke through it? Okay, here we go. On Sunday, the American Planners Association had a workshop, and there were between 65 and 75 people statewide who were planners and Urban Design Commission from around the state that attended. And since I spent 9 hours there, I'd like to at least engage you guys for at least 5 minutes of what I learned. And the interesting thing, I think, is some of the information I got seemed contradictory to what I got 2 years ago, but I'll go through this. The planning commissions are both advisory and regulatory, and so we're able to advise, and especially on planning more than platting. But there's 2 types of rules that address these, and Anchorage is a home rule municipality, and what that means is that we have our own regulations, our own ordinances that allow us the flexibility and provide us the guidance of what we're supposed to comply with. So if we were outside of Anchorage, we would possibly be I can't remember the other name, but it would not be a home rule, and in that case, the legal basis to operate would be Title 29 from the state, so it would be under the state's regulations rather than the municipality's regulations. Part of the basis for what we're doing is the U.S. and both the United States and the state constitutions, including state legislation, and our state legislation is Title 29. Our job is to protect public health and welfare. The municipal charters probably also offers some information about the boards and commissions. And the one thing that I learned, that this Platting Board is likely, not definitely, but likely set up to take the burden off planning and zoning. And so in many of the other municipalities and boroughs, there's not a separate Platting Board, that the plats are handled by the Planning Commission. We have rules and responsibilities. We are a quasi-judicial body dealing with land rights, and we are to make findings with respect to the comprehensive plan. We're to follow Robert's Rules of Order. We can always get training from the clerk's office, is always the correct word. And I think that what's important here is that if we want more training, we could request it and get that. So I think that's important if we choose and desire that. We could hold workshops if we choose to, besides our regular meetings. I haven't seen a need for that, but it's something that we could do. I have seen a need for it, but it was 10 years ago or 8 years ago. Procedural considerations, we're supposed to be using due process. That means, one of the things that means is that we're doing findings of fact. And in addition to that, we want to have fair hearings, and we want to allow the public to participate and encourage public participation, so thank you for that. Subdivision principles, this was driven home, and I'm sorry I'm going to be redundant and say this more than once, but we are the backbone of successful and prosperous community development, and we play an important role. Our decisions affect the quality of life. We create infrastructures that become fixed in place, and our goal is to create sustainable development. And I believe by our voting tonight, that's exactly what we just did on this last case, is something that's sustainable, that we've allowed for pedestrian activity for a long term. The next speaker that presented was, her title was Let's Play Nice. And I would accuse all of you of doing exactly that, which is a compliment. We make decisions, we create findings of fact. We can work with staff, and so we can individually call staff, is what has been, correct me if I'm wrong, we can call staff and ask questions of staff before the meeting. We are the first line of contact with the citizens. We are responsible for following regulations and code. I mentioned earlier is that we're supposed to read and understand the comprehensive plan, work with staff. If we find errors in staff's reports, such as I don't necessarily want to find fault for anything that happened tonight, but if we had found fault, we should call staff in advance and allow them the opportunity to correct it rather than do it here in public. So you're welcome, if we can find that. We are to run good meetings and have consistency in our process. We have set agendas that we bring, and we should follow those agendas. Make sure all perspectives are weighed, which is exactly what we're doing. We have diligent. We're intended to have diligent control over the meeting. We are encouraged to use staff wisely and have respectful dialogues with the public. Use last names when we're addressing board members and when we're addressing the public. There is a Robert's Rules of Order book that was highly recommended by this speaker because it has scripts in it that we can use directly. And it's called, I'd like the public not to hear this, please. It's called The Complete Idiot's Guide to Robert's Rules, 2nd edition. Next. I ordered it, so I'll have it soon. One of the things that they suggested we do is is not only do we have our findings and our facts and our findings, but to use the rationale for our vote. So if our decisions are appealed and it goes to court, the judge can look at what our rationales are. And we've been doing a pretty good job of this. The rationale is really important if we are making a decision that is something that is different than the policy. So, for example, tonight when I used rationale why we were following the policy, but if we chose not to follow the policies, then we should have a rationale for that. That's hopefully valid. We're to welcome the speakers and practice objective listening. Do not give too much weight to public opinions when they're opinions and not a factual basis. And this is really important. And this wasn't the intent for tonight. This what I'm talking about is different. If 100 people come and offer an opinion, and it's not based on fact or evidence, we are not here to win that popularity. We are here to follow the codes and the policies and procedures. So we have to be cautious on how we are weighing our opinions, or our decisions. We have duties to comply and conform to the ordinances. And the last time I went to one of these, which was 2 years ago, we were told by attorneys from Chicago, not Alaska, that we were to base from the public. We were only to listen to facts and we're only to decide on facts and evidence, that the only opinions we could get that to rely on were expert opinions. So this is a little different this time than last time. One of the things they talked about was not to imply consent with the statements that are being made as opinions are offered by the public, and that one of the things is that they mentioned was not sitting here nodding our heads as though we are agreeing, because, and I know that sometimes it's just a matter of communication, but we don't want to confuse the public is the concept. We're encouraged to read the packets in advance, and our recommendations that we make are important for a long time to come. For example, this subdivision isn't going to get torn down for a long time that we just approved. We are a quasi-judicial process applying regulations, and we were bound to apply the regulations. We have discretion, and that discretion is limited in the ordinances. We are encouraged to be fair and document our findings. Again, I'm being redundant. I'm just repeating from different presenters. And our decisions are based on facts and evidence and due process. Violations of due process. This will apply tonight. Ex parte contacts are one, and the approach that we took tonight is to disclose the contact. First off, to avoid them if possible. In your situation, it wasn't. And then if there is a ex parte contact, to disclose it and disclose what was said during that contact, and then the board can decide if we go forward or recuse you from that. We want to avoid personal bias and prejudgment and conflicts of interest. If we have personal bias and prejudgment coming into these meetings, we should recuse ourselves and not participate. So the concept is to read the packets, understand the packets, but come here not already decided. Come here and listen to the hearing, listen to the facts, listen to the evidence, listen to the opinions, and then make our own decisions. We should come to these meetings prepared to listen. We should read the information and determine what policies apply. Is sufficient information for us. We want to be clear about the process, be clear about the decision process. We want to be fair and impartial and treat everyone with respect. Making decisions, we want to document the facts. We want to document the testimony. We want to document the standards the decisions are based on. We want to document how the standards are not met if the standards are not being met. The next presenter was Mr. Brooks Chandler, who is an attorney. He works for Boyd Chandler and Falconer. He is essentially an expertise in municipal law and represents many of the municipalities around the state. And this one statement from him I want to it really brought home to me, I want to share with everybody on the board, is that our work in the Platting Board and our work on planning and zoning commissions and the other commissions is most of the time more meaningful in the short term than what our elected officials do. So here we are working on a voluntary basis, making decisions that have huge long-term impacts, hopefully beneficial, and that we probably do more good for the community, this is his opinion, than our elected officials do in the short term. So I'm thanking you for him. Part of what we do is based on constitutional. We want to be reasonable, not arbitrary. We want to follow code. We want to advance public intent, and we want to this is important, coming from an attorney. I know we have counsel here. But we want to regulate this. I want to stress this. We want to regulate rather than ban. So just this last case would be an example. We didn't ban fences, but we regulated how the easement is going to work, which has a regulation on the fences. So we didn't ban the fences, but they're regulated. So and that's just an example. It's important to understand that we don't want to arbitrarily ban a practice, but we can use the regulations to require the compliance. We want to be consistent. Our decisions cannot be random, and we want to be cautious in that what we decide may set a precedence for the future. So we want to always be cognizant of what we're setting. How do we do this? We apply the same procedures to everyone. We explain our reasoning behind our decisions. We reference facts in the record. We reference the code. We do not rely on neighbors' opposition alone. This is not a popularity vote basing everything on facts and findings in the code. Conditions are connected to impacts. Okay, procedural issues, this is probably more for the chairman, but time limits is an art. So even though we have established time limits, sometimes you would allow a petitioner, or excuse me, a presenter to go on more. You can certainly ask questions and get them to go on, but sometimes if it's really important, we can use our discretion, but we want to try to be consistent, and it's really the chairman's responsibility to control the meetings and keep decorum and stick with our rules. Cross-exam, this is important. This is contrary to what I heard 2 years ago. Cross-examination is not required as part of due process regarding property rights. And so, correct me if I state this wrong, but my understanding is that if somebody from the public wants to cross-examine staff, that's at our discretion whether we allow it or not. It's not required under due process for property rights. Is that? I got contrary information 2 years ago from a different attorney, and I'm going to go with what this person said and what you said, and we're talking. Right, and this is. That's the argument I'm bringing, or that's the discussion I'm bringing, is that for property issues under due process, we do not have to allow cross-examination of staff. So, yes. That's the way I understand what was presented also.
Well, that's one of the other things that we do when we get those kinds of questions raised. We may ask ourselves instead of cross-examination, but the questions back to staff.
Oh, I agree. And the reason that I'm making a little bit of an issue of this is 2 years ago I was told we're supposed to allow people to, if they choose to come in here and cross-examine, and it could spend all night doing that. And I think we should go with what we're discussing tonight, that we can use their...
I think they're limited to time. If they use their time to ask questions, still capped on time, they can't cross-examine all night.
Well, from what I'm understanding, from what was presented and from what Mr. Cole is saying, is it's at our discretion if we want to allow them to cross-examine staff or not. And we still have the option to...
The reality is that when they testify, they're only testifying. They're not requiring any response from anyone.
Okay.
We're here to listen to their testimony, consider their testimony. Staff doesn't require to respond directly.
That's what I'm saying. Okay, so I'm agreeing with you completely. If it sounded like I was disagreeing, I miscommunicated. All right. But if that situation were to occur, the protocol is to go through the chair with my permission before I even allow them to talk to staff. Okay, so thank you. Okay. The role of the municipal attorney. This is something that we don't usually have municipal attorneys here, but the role of a municipal attorney is not to make decisions. Their role is to help provide us understanding, but it's our responsibility to make the decisions. And findings are a legal requirement, so they're the basis for our conclusions, and that's certainly consistent with 2 years ago as well. As far as findings goes, I'm not recommending this, nor did they recommend it, but this was from the, I don't want to call him the attorney, I want to call him the municipal attorney. His name, I lost it, so I'm sorry, but I'm sorry? Oh, go ahead. Yes. At the very beginning I did. It's up to me, I guess. Sometimes I do and sometimes I don't. And I try to, if I can, streamline these. I lost my place, but what I want to do is important. Here we go. I found my place. Okay. As far as findings one thing that we can do, Mr. Whitfield, is we can say, quote, I move to have staff develop findings that support our decisions. Well, we're just interpreting body language right now. I'm not recommending that we do that, and in fact, I recommend that we take responsibility for our own decisions and our own findings. And then we have to approve those findings. So I think it's better that we do it ourselves. And if we disagree with staff, then we need to explain why we disagree with staff on our decisions. Okay, so guys, I'm on the last page, so it's going to go fast now. Next presenter, know the codes, know what is allowed, what is not allowed. Prepare in advance questions for staff, for the applicant, and even for the public. Prepare notes to, this was really stressed, to prepare notes to support our motions. So as we're sitting here, it's sort of a dynamic process. We've prepared by reading the information that's presented to us. We're now picking up testimony from the public. We're getting new facts, possibly, and new evidence, and we're having to formulate all this on the go. And so we should be taking notes as we're listening to these hearings of what we want to put into our findings. We want to listen to the public, show respect. We want to earn their trust. We want to be fair. We want to look for new information. We want to ask questions and respond to testimony in our findings. And just my personal opinion is we do a really good job at this. Making motions, we want to build findings of fact. I know I'm being repetitive here. I didn't have time to organize my notes. Do our homework, listen, read in advance. Amendments. Amendments are to add, delete, substitute, or modify, and this is to amend the original motion, and it can get confusing, so we want to be specific. And one thing that I left out of my notes, I think, but one of the things that was discussed is having 20 or 30 amendments on the table and being totally confused. And the concept was try to manage one amendment, resolve one amendment before we allow a second amendment on the table. Okay, so Mr. Cole, this next question that I asked, we had a 1-hour work session that we got to ask questions, and we split up into two groups, rural and urban. So I went to the urban, and I asked a question on your behalf as though you were there. What happens if a petitioner does not show up and has no representative? And so I want to give you the consensus from the other planners, is that this is not a basis to deny a plat. But if we have a question for the petitioner or the petitioner's representative, we can postpone the hearing to a set date. And so that means that we can set out for the next month, or we can set it for 2 months out. And then I'm pretty sure the petitioner or their representative are going to show up and answer our questions. So I think I have a solution that will satisfy everybody on this board.
I mean, it seems pretty straightforward. If you agree with staff recommendations, the petitioner doesn't show up, and it's nobody has any issues with what staff. You approve it, it's okay. Right? The problem is we've had objection.
And we've had 3 of those.
At that point, yeah, you're done.
We've had 3 of those, and so I think we have a solution now that's workable. And that ends my time summarizing. Sure.
So that you know, I don't quite understand, but since I've been here, it's been ground into me how important it is with fact findings.
Yes.
Okay, and
Oh, I think I can answer your question. Of course, I'm not an attorney or an attorney spokesman, but I'll give it my best. We can rely on that information, and it is factual what they're stating, but we need to be explicit that we're relying on that. So does that answer your question?
I just think we get a really good package. We do a lot of work, and it's a lot better than a lot of places. And I understand where their appeals get overturned, but the boards don't do their job. They just come and make a decision. These guys do a great job for us.
I agree. I agree. And the only thing that, from the trainings that I've been to, is if we're going to adopt the staff's findings, we need to adopt them. And what I can't remember this attorney's name, but what he was saying is that we really need to have a clear record of what those findings are, and we could read and adopt the staff's findings, or we could just refer to them. But from 2 years ago and from this year, it seems like we should be citing these so that there's a definite basis for our decisions.
Because that's what gets read in the record.
Mr. Whitfield. And that's.
I don't want to delay it. I'll go talk to somebody. That's never been my understanding. The record is the record. Maybe it's part of it, but it's not clear.
You could call the municipal attorney and during the week or during the day. Yeah.
I would say
You want to have. Okay.
I would say one thing, that when it comes down to it, if we didn't notice it in the packet or whatever, whereas if we were to have set it into the record, the appellant is going to have a hard time saying they didn't know about it when they sat there discussing. So the first line of the hard line is going to be, did they even discuss those items? And if the answer is yes, well, they knew about them. They might have missed, item number 3 that wasn't discussed. That's all I'm saying. Thank you.
I move to adjourn.
That's the next item on the agenda. Meeting is adjourned, and it is 9:32. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.